coming to you live.
Yes, live.
Live.
Welcome to the Ref Room.
Hockey talk for parents, players, coaches, and fans.
Text everyone you know. Facebook, chat, tweet, buzz, bling. I don't know. Just do what you have to do.
This is the Ref Room with Scott and Brad.
Come on, come on, come on. It's about to go down.
The Ref Room starts right now.
Yes, it does. It starts absolutely right now. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. It's Wednesday. Get your peanut butter and jelly sandwich ready to go because it's lunch in the Ref Room with me, Scott Smokin' Sills, and my man, Brad Baumrock. And we're going to get to it right away because we got a very special guest today in the house. And, Brad, I'm going to let you introduce this man.
All right, so right now we're going to have Mr. John Dunn come on, who is the AHAI business executive. I think is his current title. He's been the referee-in-chief of Illinois. He's been the IHOA president, and he's also been the AHAI president. He's on top of all the current data that we have going on in Illinois, and then luckily enough, because he does so much and has so much extra spare time, he knows a lot of things going on with USA Hockey as well. So, John, thanks for coming on today.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Well, welcome. We got some great news because hockey's back. Am I correct, John? Tell us all about it.
Yeah, starting just about an hour and a half ago, we have all the metro areas in Phase 4. So what Phase 4 means for all of us is games. The state is allowing competition in those rinks in those areas. So all the regions in central Illinois and north are all in Phase 4. There's still one area down south, East St. Louis, that is in a mitigation tier 2, but we have no rinks in that area, so we're not worrying about that. So starting today, any game here in Illinois is approved by the state, and it can be sanctioned by AHAI and USA Hockey.
So for that, for us, that means we have score sheets again. Everything is legit and
just
above
like you
board.
would normally do in a normal, non-pandemic, goofy, silly year. It goes back to normal.
Yep, that's
Right?
awesome.
So you don't have to worry about what rink you're in. You don't have to worry about what region you're in at this date and time. Now, obviously, things can change, but as of today, we had the final 2 areas, which encompasses some large parts of our membership. So that would be McHenry and Lake County. So all the Vernon Hills and those rinks up there are now open. And the other big area that was still not able to play games was Kane and DuPage County, which is Region 8. So those are both opened up as of about 10:30 this morning. So
awesome. That's great news. So tell us, are there any special instructions that the referees need to know with regard to the games? Do they have to do anything differently or special that you're aware of at this point in time, or is it just business as usual?
Well, it's business as usual with how you work and operate the games. You know, it's all the same. It's the USA rules, and what you might be referencing is any safety mitigations.
Yeah.
What everybody is referencing would be what the state and local guidelines are. So if you go into a rink and they require masks, that's what you have to do.
Right.
AHAI itself has always had the stance of follow state and local municipality guidelines, and they're the ones that are on the hook. I mean, they're the ones that need to interpret it. Between a private facility, a private rink would interpret something different than maybe a public rink, or Fox Valley Rink and the Forest Preserve out there is going to interpret the guidelines differently than say Winnetka or Orland. So they all interpret things a little bit differently. So when you go into the rinks, depending on if they're using locker rooms or not using locker rooms, temperatures, whatever they're requiring is what we need to adhere to. So from the AHAI and the USA point of view, it's just follow the local guidelines of the facilities, etc.
Well, that's great news. I know everybody's very excited. Now, with regard to that, do we have any seminars that are going to take place that you guys are aware of in order to, facilitate the needed people to do these games?
I can answer that one from right here. Board meeting is on Monday, so I'm sure it'll be a hot topic item. Going back to the mitigations of every rink, I think the best suggestion is be flexible, right, John? Correct. As officials, you're going to go in and they may have some crazy thing where you need to have your temperature checked with 3 masks on and sunglasses. Just be ready to do it. I know it sounds crazy, but if if we don't follow the rules, they're not going to let us play.
Exactly.
So, and I think that's what everybody wants to get back to. John, the one thing I was wondering, and it's funny because somebody just put it in the comment, and he lives in Wyoming. If the tiers back up and they end up going into more lockdown type situations, for the officials, I don't know if you even know this answer. I thought of it last night and this morning. If I'm an official that lives in an area that's restricted and they can't play, can I go officiate in a place that is open? I mean, I don't know how that's working with the teams. I don't know if that's. I'm sorry if I'm catching you on that, but it just.
No, the answer is yes.
Okay.
Right? The answer that AHAI got from the Illinois Department of Public Health, we can't talk. I don't know about Wyoming because everything's different.
Right.
But for the local municipal, for Illinois, they don't recommend you cross regions, and that was based on team and competition play. Now, if you're logical about things, one, everybody's officials have been able to travel to Michigan if that was open and officiate in Michigan or Wisconsin. Why would we come down on someone trying to stay local, which is much safer and healthier for everybody to stay more local than traveling. And I put it in more simple terms is because there was some concern about teams playing, say teams from Lake County when Lake County was closed, going to play out in Rockford that was open. And some people read those rules as from the Illinois Department of Public Health, that you can read them a certain way. They're very vague on what they do, but they do state certain facts. But as far as that goes, if it's okay for them to go play in an open area in Pleasant Prairie, why isn't it okay for them to go play in an open area of Rockford? And if the restaurant's open in Rockford, there's nobody stopping you driving from DuPage County to go eat in Rockford, whether or not you want to or not. It's a different question, maybe. But,
Right. So now, I guess my next question is: we have multiple sites that we deal with in trying to find games to work. We have, Three Blind Mice. We have the AHAI site, and of course Horizon, which doesn't affect you guys, but it is a third site. So will all the games that are on the AHAI site now, or on the Three Blind Mice site, will those migrate over to the AHAI site, or are we going to work with two different sites currently, and eventually we'll kind of phase one more out and into the AHAI site?
In the short term, they'll probably both be operating, because the most important part, the reality is we want games covered. So you don't have to worry about it. It'll be a logistical thing between the two entities to get them to the right place. It could, for the clubs, it's all about billing, and for the officials, it's all about getting paid and working the games. But from the bigger point of view, the reason that the AHAI site existed, it was to help make sure we had the right coverage on the right games. That's still the goal. Mm-hmm. And those two systems are I won't say they're totally interchangeable, but they're molded after each other. Those games will eventually merge over into the AHAI system. So they'll be more consistent with billing for the clubs, paying out for the officials, and just keeping the regular track. It has some other benefits too, because we have player development coming up. One of the ways the coaches need to be able to rank the players is have games in the AHAI database. So that's solved by being able to put some of those games over. It solves some of those issues also. But for the officials, I'm say a short term, you might need to see both. And I'm just referencing the Three Blind Mice one and the AHAI one. Right. And as rinks open and close in the AHAI database, when rinks or areas close, rinks in those areas will not be allowed to access games. So in other words, if Region 8 closes back down, goes back to mitigation Tier 1, those rinks you will not be able to see games in the AHAI database there. So if those guys are still going to do games, you'll see those in the Three Blind Mice.
Perfect.
So the Three Blind Mice and the AHAI have a lot of things in common, meaning they make sure that all the officials are registered and certified. So that's a good thing and a safety point for the clubs. But when you talk about USA Insurance, et cetera, and my understanding is the other systems aren't always current with the registrations from USA Hockey and who's complete and who's not. And we've gotten some non-certified officials working games, and the clubs did not realize they weren't certified. So that can be that issue can be eliminated by going through the AHAI site.
So does that cease now? There are no unregistered officials working on any of the games that are coming through AHAI. Is that correct?
Correct. Okay. Only certified and fully registered officials can work those games, and it kind of goes back to your question that Brad answered before about non-registered or officials that aren't completely certified. I know IHOA has been very diligent sending notices out, trying to get everybody registered. It's going to happen, and when it happens, it's going to come fast.
Yeah, well, we've been talking about it for months here. Right. I mean, we've still continued to support, guys, stay with the program here. We'll eventually open.
So, the good news is, Brad can probably touch on it, that there are probably seminars out there. USA officiating programs, I think, going to do seminars. So you can go to a seminar online anywhere in the country. You don't have to wait for IHOA to do one. So if there are some that come out, but again, they would be limited at this point in time.
Okay.
Scott, the one thing that I could say about our area is we had some sidebar meetings. We've had, our normal board meetings. And this is just, I know this pertains mostly to Illinois for most people. Sorry if you're in New York and watching this, we can still help you. You can come to our seminar. We've had people from California. We've had guys from New York. We've had all kinds of stuff. And actually, there were 3 guys that were from California that did one of our IHOA seminars, and the people that ran it said that they were the best guests because they had all kinds of questions that apparently either weren't answered in their local or just because, we're from the Midwest and we do things a little bit different, even though we're all following the USA Hockey guidelines and the model. We do things a little different than they do in California or New York. And sometimes it's very beneficial to go be with people outside of your normal comfort group. So they've really enjoyed it. But I know Illinois, it's a big talk that if stuff starts getting going, which it kind of sounds like it is, hopefully, thank you, finally, I'm sure we'll be able to put together some seminars. I wouldn't be too worried about it. There's a lot of people that are involved. We had some seminars come up last minute last year, and they were filled faster with instructors than we've ever had. So I would say sit back, we're going to do some stuff. But if you're nervous about it, there were a couple things on the USA site the other day. I think there was one in Wisconsin and one in New York that's running, I think, this weekend. So
somebody said there was one last night. I don't know if that's true, but somebody said a coach said he had a player that was taking a seminar last night. So I don't, I was kind of surprised, but who knows? So my next question is, as we move forward with this, we had an email that came out basically saying that state tournaments had been canceled, John, and things of that nature. Where do we stand on that? Is that still going to be the case, or is there any chance we could have any kind of championships or anything of that nature that could still happen? Can you explain some of that? Because I know they still have nationals and tournaments that they want to get some of these players to. So how are we affected by that?
Well, the levels that we're at in phase 4 allow for game competition, and that is a change from when we were in phase 4 in September and October. We were in the same phase that they were not allowing that. They changed when they came back, so that was good news. The other news is there's still no state or league tournaments for high risk or medium risk sports at this time. So that's if you go to the IDPH, the sports safety guidance, you can see the metrics in there, meaning the levels that everything needs to happen. And level 4 is basically wide open. But I think it's level 4, but right where we're at now, it allows regional and league competitions. It does not allow for state or league playoff competitions for anyone except the low risk sports. So it is a little convoluted. A lot of it is written based on high school sports. So it's you have to interpret it a little bit for club sports, which is mostly what this is.
Right.
But That's so the way an AI would interpret it is league play. For the tier ones, they're in a Michigan league, so those teams can come here and play because that's a league play game. Leagues are still trying to maybe play a few games here or there. Most of them have just ceased, and they're trying to move on to spring and just get a fresh start. But that's the state tournament is still not being allowed to happen, and with what the state guidelines are, and in the timing that we would need to have it, it was the best thing to cancel it right there, because it's also a financial commitment for everybody,
Sure.
Not just the clubs, but AHI has purchased the ice, and we had to negotiate, making sure that ice was going to either be compensated for next year or whatever. So it's not a big ticket. So we needed to make a decision with that in mind. Like you mentioned, USA Nationals currently was moved from middle of March, what it generally is. They moved it back to the end of April. So it's the last week in April, first week in May. The high school nationals is a few weeks earlier in Omaha. But for even the nationals, they have not even announced where they're all going to be. So when this first started, they had two in California. California said that we can't do it. They had one in New York who said we can't do it. And last I've heard, Michigan is struggling with whether or not they can do it because they still can't technically play games in Michigan. So they're not quite sure where those nationals are going to be. But,
I just saw, as we were, all in the pre-show, I saw USA Hockey put out something, I think it was last night, that they canceled the Disabled Festival.
That's been canceled. But again, that's a little bit different ballgame because those are a lot of high-risk participants.
Right, and I understand that. It's just I saw it and I was like, oh, there goes another thing that people get the chance to do, and it's just one thing after another. Scott, there's a great comment over there that John would probably not have an issue there from Kevin Haller.
Yeah, I was going to put that up. Let's just bring that up now. Yeah. So Kevin says if a Tier 4 region goes back to Tier 3, games are not sanctioned anymore, or is it when they go all the way back to Tier 1?
Okay, if they go back to Tier 3, that's where we were in DuPage and Kane yesterday. So no games, no sanctioned games.
Right. Back to practice.
Right, and if we go back to the Tier 1 mitigation, then that was when they just shut everything down in youth sports. All youth sports was on pause. So that's what Tier 1 mitigation, and it's hard to follow the states. Those Tier 1 mitigations didn't exist until last November, and then all of a sudden they appeared, and it confuses people, because we went through phase 1, phase 2, and we're trying to get to phase 5. But these mitigations got pushed in between phase 3 and phase 4. So
yeah, they made like subgroups. Because
right,
we had a Department of Health guy explain it to our board that I'm involved in with the Chamber of Commerce, and even he was struggling with we're in tier whatever part. He's like, hang on, let me double check. And like he'd only done the speech like 2 times. So, but hey, John, I know this sounds crazy, but we toss around the term, me and Scott a lot, and a lot of other people, sanctioned and unsanctioned. So can you give the actual definition of what a sanctioned game is compared to an unsanctioned game? Because I know how it all works, but I don't think a lot of other people might.
The definition for an AI sanctioned game is a game played in an open area between 2 certified roster USA Hockey teams with USA Hockey certified officials. You can add in there, you use a score clock and you have a score sheet. That is a sanctioned game. A non-sanctioned game would be rosters that have overage players on them. You show up and the Sabres are in a jersey that calls them the Swords. You go to a tournament that might not be sanctioned because of whatever reason they're in an area that couldn't be. That's hard for AI to determine. But for an official knowing what a sanctioned game isn't, it's certified rosters, certified officials, certified score sheet, USA Hockey rules.
So as long as you brought that up, I guess I'll bring up the point. You do have some teams that have changed their names or whatever they've needed to do. So I don't mean to single anybody out, but let's just take the Catholic League, for example. Are they all on board now? Are they all the teams coming back? Is that something that like the Archdiocese has agreed to with everybody? Or are we still kind of in a situation where some will come back and some won't? Because I know there's like a thing with the two dioceses, and I don't know how that works, but can you speak to that? I mean, is everybody back in the game? Are we going to see all the schools we would normally see, or it's still up to the schools and
It's
if
still
there's
up
one?
to the individual clubs and the schools, and I know the Catholic League, they're more connected to their schools than most of the clubs and et cetera. So, the youth clubs are, they're self-run, so they answer to themselves. And you will, even within youth clubs, you'll have certain teams that want to continue on, certain that don't. Certain have different motivations. You have some organizations that have played upwards of 40 or 50 games already, and they've had a regular season, where you have other teams in that organization that haven't been able to do anything because they just haven't. You take some of the Chicago youth organizations, and they were in such a tight lockdown for so long, and schools weren't allowing players to come back to school. And you had that on the North Shore group. You had in the city, you had all the parents had to quarantine if they left the city. So they had some issues, so they weren't playing very many games. So it's all over the board. And it's up to the individual clubs and the teams to decide whether or not they want to go.
So I'm guessing most will come back. It seems like we're starting to see some games in rinks that we haven't seen anything in a long time. There's been nothing in Chicago for God knows how long. I mean, but it's great
Correct.
to see some of these.
You saw a lot of the private rinks going about their business the best they could, because it's a business. Yeah. And then the public facilities, the park districts and things, they had to be a lot more restrictive because they answered to the government. So that's why it was kind of all over the board, and it's another. You're seeing a lot of variation in game counts for teams, etc. And will they all come back into the fold? Probably. Will there be still some opportunities to go play games as a non-sanctioned if they so choose? We have no control over that. And basically we're just a little bit away from spring, and spring is spring releases everything, and it's kind of wide open. Players don't have to worry about playing on multiple rosters.
Yeah, so what happens? I mean, normally we're kind of done with the season in March, roughly. We get all the playoff games done and the tournaments are done. And then we usually have some sort of a spring league, which we didn't have last year, but we have some sort of a spring league that kicks off in like April, May, I guess. Will we see that sort of thing this year, and will things be a little different? Have you heard anything about that?
Well, let's hope it looks normal. We hope we have all that. Right now, it looks like it'll just kind of play itself out as normal, meaning teams' current rosters can currently go up to March 31st. So they have basically 2 months, if their area is open, to do whatever they choose to do.
So there's been no extension to those that roster time period? Because I know there was talk. I was talking to a fellow referee that's a high school student the other day, and I think he wrestles, if I'm not mistaken. So they are actually allowed to wrestle into like late June, I believe is what he said. So they've extended everything. I think football is supposed to go later in the year than they normally would, obviously, because they're normally fall. But they're going to go through even past the point where school's done for them in the end of May, and they're still going to be participating in sports into June. So,
yeah, well, for the high schools and for the ISHA, it's a little different equation than the issues that we have here at our wonderful youth hockey. I mean, when you start talking about spring, that's you have tier 1 teams starting spring camps. You have tier 2 teams that or high school teams that are looking to start their spring so they can bring in potential 8th graders. You have a lot of other equations that the high schools don't really equate to that at that point. They don't have ice commitments, that they would have to extend that because most of their facilities are already technically paid for, I suppose.
Right.
But if clubs have to start extending seasons, et cetera, that could come into extra costs and some other things that go along those lines. So at this point in time, in a normal season, the Illinois State tournament would be over March 1st and spring would start pretty much right after. And the only teams that would have to stay together are the ones advancing on to nationals, which is a very limited number. I mean,
Right.
you're talking like 7 or 8, maybe 14, 15 different teams that could be possibly out of, thousands of teams. So I think you're going to see, spring starting its normal thing and everybody hoping just to kind of get back to our normal spring, regroup, and move forward. But it's still until March 31st. At this point, there's been, I don't know what the school, like I said, the schools themselves have their own thought process. I've heard some are opting out of playing, some are staying in. It's up to them.
Well, we're asking you a lot of tough questions because, we're just looking for answers, and so I really appreciate what, the knowledge you're sharing with us. I do have a comment here. Steve Rickard has put one up. He says there are 10 seminars being offered right now, level 1 through 4.
You must be on the USA site right now.
So I'm guessing they are trying to do what they can to get everybody back in as quickly as possible. We've told you for months now, guys, that this might happen.
Get on it.
And to be prepared because unlike years past, you have to get re-screened. So you have to go to a new screening service, and it's the same service that's used by other sports. So they are going to be busy. So there could be a bit of a delay, even if you take the seminar and you get all your modules and your tests done. You still have to get your screening done. And, I'm guessing normally it takes 4 or 5 days if you're doing it early in the season. I don't know if it's going to be 2 weeks now or not. So it's something to think about, getting things done as quickly as possible.
Well, the one thing, Scott, that I'll mention out here too, and we had talked about it before, was, when sports starts open, especially like ice hockey, well, the other sports are going to be open too.
Right.
Well, that screening site is used by multiple organizations in multiple sports. So they're going to be backlogged. I assume it's mostly done by computer. And it happens, and then somebody checks it. Well, if it gets backlogged, now you're stuck and you're waiting for it. And I can tell you that in Illinois, we have over 100 officials right now that aren't completely done. So if you happen to be one of them watching, you might want to start that up there. I know there's been some emails sent out. One went out by Mr. Dunn himself yesterday morning. And it was, saying that stuff's going to get going, basically, was the gist of the email. And I think we need to get our stuff together, boys and girls.
Yep.
John, you mentioned one thing, that rosters end the 31st of March. Can you elaborate on what that actually means? Again, I know what that means about rosters ending and AHAI sanctioning. And can you elaborate on that?
That means a fall team, a USA certified roster. That's the sunset date for that roster for AHAI. So unless they're advancing, again, this year's a special year that it's advancing because the teams that would happen to go to nationals, if they do, would need to stay together. But again, that's the sunset date. And in the past, the AHAI rule and the USA rule really is the day after, or 48 hours after your state tournament or your national tournament is over, that you can start your spring. So since we don't have a state tournament and the nationals are pushed so far out, that's the sunset date. Could that move? Possibly, but I think at this point in time, I think we have quite a number of people that are just looking to, to get going, get back to what they know. And I don't think the officials will notice any difference if we just get going. They might have a busier March than they had in the past because there was all playoffs and things in March. But beyond that, I think they should be okay.
Brad, is that crosstalk coming from your area?
Did you hear one of my children? Is that what you said?
Crosstalk, I called it.
Yeah.
All right.
They're being really, really good.
I know they are
up in the front room, and they're really trying hard over there.
And I got to send out my sympathies to one of your sons. He got something broken the other day, so he is now officially a hockey player. Make no mistake about it. So I hope he gets better quickly.
Yeah, he's got a brace. He broke his wrist, and but proud dad moment. Unfortunately, I wasn't there. But the best part was, he was on the ice, but he got up and he skated to the bench and told his coach that he was hurt. And his coach replied to him that
he said, "Are you hurt or are you injured?
Are you injured?" And he was like, "I'm injured." And he's
there
like,
you
"I
go.
better call mom."
Yeah.
So he couldn't grab his stick. But thank you very much. He's in good spirits. He's the coolest kid on the block now.
I love it.
So it is what it is.
Yeah. So I wanted to cover this. Michael says, "Sorry if I missed this. I'm looking at the site and don't see any games scheduled. When do we think sanctioned games will start to be played?" Well, if you look at the AHAI site, there are games up there now. So there's games up on Three Blind Mice, and there's games up on the AHAI site. I wonder if you're not seeing them, would that mean, are you complete? So can referees see games if they're not complete? That would be a question, John.
Correct. They will not, on either site, they can't have, both sites use complete certified officials.
So that may be why you're not seeing. I don't know, Michael. Tell us if you're complete or not, but that might be a reason why.
Yeah, but I mean, they'll start to migrate over because maybe he's got certain rinks blocked out. He only has rinks in his area, and his areas are just opening up.
Yeah.
So those will start to migrate over, and again, there might be an overlap over time, and even if games, it could be games could be played today or yesterday or tomorrow in the Three Blind Mice site. They just might migrate over, and as long as the officials get paid and the billing for the clubs is correct, that's and really we don't want to miss games.
I can just tell you, Michael, from my personal experience yesterday looking at the site, I think on AHAI site, I only saw games in Skokie that were up at the time. So I think there's a lot more that will be populating in there. So if you don't see something, maybe you don't have Skokie on your list or something happened. But, I'd say worst case scenario, send Brad an email and Brad will look into it. So refroombrad at gmail.com. And Brad will personally take an interest in this and make sure that it gets taken care of for you.
Sure.
Only because you watched the show.
I'm currently looking at the AHAI site. There are 4 games available right now, and 3 of them are at Skokie. And if anybody wants to take a ride down to Danville, there's a game down there, which it's kind of off my beaten path. I have all the rinks open on our site. So I see everything across the state that's available that's in that system. So it's
Chris says LIHOA has a seminar February 6th. Is that like Los Angeles Hockey Officials Association?
I would say, yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it could be Louisiana Hockey Officials.
Chris,
I don't know, but
he's from California originally.
Oh, he's California. Okay, so probably Los Angeles would be my guess.
And just so everybody knows, we are not ignoring comments on YouTube.
Yeah,
they are supposed to populate. Like, Scott, can you share the screen?
Yeah, so Chris, you did have some stuff that came in from YouTube, but it's been kind of strange today, guys. We had to restart the stream, so I hope you're seeing everything that you want. It looks like we have quite a few viewers on right now on YouTube because I'm seeing the number up here, and as well as Facebook. So every now and then they make changes, and usually it's a privacy setting and something just doesn't function like we'd like. Unfortunately, this is live. This is not recorded. So we just kind of deal with it. We had to restart the screen. Not that it wasn't working, but, we weren't seeing. Normally we'd see who's not who's seeing the show, but the number of people that we can normally see that. And we couldn't see it earlier. So we just opted to restart the stream. So that should clarify any confusion you guys might have had if something wasn't up there. But we're here, and there's lots of people watching right now. So probably because we got the special guest, John Dunn, who's former president of AHAI and former referee-in-chief. And if you've never had the pleasure of working with John, he's a really good referee as well. I've never seen him as a linesman because he's always got bans. But hey, right, John?
Because I'm too old to get out of the way.
Right. Don't want to take that hit on the blue line. I totally understand.
Right. I don't gear up like Buddy Monaco used to.
Yeah. So if you guys are joining us late, we have great news because hockey is reopened in Illinois as of about 2 hours ago. So we are back to normal as can be in terms of what we do and how we do things. And that's what we've been covering. But I want to kind of switch it up a little bit because we have covered some of this. We'll certainly take questions. So if you guys have more questions, feel free to put them in. But I want to ask you, it's a rule change year, and we will be affected by this. Brad and I have talked considerably about some of the new rule changes that are coming for next season, possibly. It looks like they've passed the first test. So can you tell us a little bit more? You probably go to that meeting, or you have gone to that meeting. How does it actually work? And once they've actually passed the potential for a rule change, and let's just throw an example of there that maybe stick above the shoulder will not be all the way at the other end. Maybe that was one of the rule changes that could be happening. How do you guys get to vote on that? And when do we actually find out? Are the rules that we've seen now that they suggest should be changed, do they usually get passed, or does some of that stuff get voted down? How does that work?
There's a vetting process, and so the way it works is there's a bylaw in the USA Hockey Guidebook that you have to have a submission by a certain amount, a certain date. So that goes to, there is a playing rules committee at USA Hockey that there's a lot of good people at it, and they look through the rules. They take those rules, put them into some form that can be sent out to respective other sections or committees. So in other words, it would probably go to the coaches committee, the CEP, so they could get their input on what the coaching side thinks of a rule change, why it's good, why it's bad for development. Go to the ADM guys, is this good for development? Sometimes those are the groups that propose the rule changes because they think it's better for development. The ADM guys were instrumental in the instant offsides at the lower levels because of the development of those players at those levels. So that was the ADM driving that. So it goes to those section, it goes to the officials section, it goes to the players section, that gets vetted through there. I think what that just happened at the winter meeting is there was some recommendations of which ones to move forward, which ones need a little work, which ones can just be, there's no interest in, dismissed, or whatever that is. And it ends up being debated until they get to their annual meeting in June, and then their USA Hockey Board votes on it. And the USA Hockey Board is made up of people from all around the country. Illinois is part of what's called the Central District, and Central District has 4 votes on any of those board votes. So Illinois has 1 representative on the Central District directors. So basically Illinois is for as much membership and as much influence that, are the good things that IHOA in particular and others do. They have a very small voice at USA Hockey. So it's a lot of work to get there, but it's the board of directors that vote those up or down based a lot on the recommendations of the committee. So they would look strongly at the coaching committee, what they would have to say, the playing rules. So the playing rules committee would say it's recommended, it's not. But the board sees all the rule changes, sees the recommendations or the recommendation to not pass it. They see all that, and then they make their determination on that.
All right, so let's go out on a limb here and put you on the spot a little bit and ask you, are there any rules that you think might be changed this year? What do you think we might be looking at? If you were getting your crystal ball out, I'm sure you've had a chance to look at a few of the proposed changes. I mean, are we going to not be able to ice the puck anymore on a penalty kill in the, above Bantam, starting at midget? There was talk about that. There's talk about no more delayed offsides.
I didn't hear a lot of talk about those. I wasn't in the rule point. I was in some other meetings that, it's all virtual this year. So it's hard to say. I think there's more pressure for a little bit of pressure for the icing, but the biggest one that they had out there was reducing the number of penalties. So a player got, the current rule is 5 and 15 for a coach, 5 for a player, 15. They're reducing those down to 4 and
I missed that.
Or 12 for the team. So there's a lot of push for something like that. Those types of things are being pushed more than the actual rule change. I think at this point, without a lot of push, to change the game, icing and that type of thing is something that they're trying not to do if possible.
Well, there was
a lot of these rules, especially now, so if there's, we have some IHOA people that do a great job of presenting rules, Jack Reslowski in particular. Every year sends potential rule changes based on what he thinks would be a safer environment or just means the game could be better. But they take a lot of those things, and in the USA Hockey Player Development camps, if any of the officials have gotten to work those, that they try a lot of those things. They, they utilize, some of the rules where, 2 halves to a game, or the non-icing on when you're shorthanded. They use those to test those out and see how the players adapt and whether or not, that it's an easy, it's an easy fix or something that they see different usage. And
it's a very small part, John. You are correct with where they test things out at the development camps, which a lot of people don't realize when they pick the select teams for USA. They have summer camps that the players go and they play games, multiple teams, and they play games, but you're not on your normal team. And the officials come in and they run in tangent with each other. So the officials, certain development camps referee certain levels, and they've re-tiered them and changed them over the years. So I know somebody else that'll probably come in and really talk about that, so I'm not going to get into it. But it's very interesting because, John, when I was at a development camp, they were testing I think the 2 halves. They wanted to try 2 halves. And one day we played 2 halves. And it was very weird because the first couple games of the day, they played where the goalie started on opposite sides. And then the other part of the day, they played where the goalie started on their normal sides. So you kind of were going out on the ice going, this is very awkward. And they came down and they talked to us extensively afterwards. And we're just the people enforcing the rules. They wanted our opinion too. It was kind of interesting. So I'm glad you brought that up. That's a great point. I wouldn't have thought of that myself.
Well, if you play men's league at Johnny's for years, they played 2 halves. And they finally changed that rule. But for years, it was 2 halves. And we've seen it at some of the tournaments. And usually they do start at the opposite end, so you don't have the long change, when it comes down to it, when you're probably going to be pulling your goaltender. So one of the other rules that I was kind of interested in that they were talking about, John, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at this, but they were talking about reducing penalty times down from 2 minutes to either a minute and a half or a minute, depending on how much time you played in your game, which actually, when I thought about it, I didn't like it at first because we'd have to calculate a minute and a half penalty if the scorekeeper couldn't get the information up on the clock. But really, like for a squirt player that takes a tripping penalty in a 12-minute period, do they really need to sit 2 minutes for that? Or would you like to see them reduced down to a minute or a minute and a half?
I mean, there is rules in place for normal mite squirt things to reduce that type of thing. If you look at Northwest Hockey League, that does most of our house programs, their play is within those guidelines, based on those guidelines. What we see at the Tier 2 and the Tier 1 level is, all they want to do is play longer games. It affects us as officials.
They are getting longer.
When a JV game is 3 16-minute periods
16s with an ice cut. 16s with an ice cut.
It's requiring a lot. And then when you start, if you think about the levels that you could reduce those, the training levels, yes. At the upper levels, me as a coach or as an official, if I'm calling a penalty, they're creating an infraction, so they are taking away an advantage from a team, so you want to give that advantage to the other team. And you don't want penalties. By diminishing what a penalty is, I think you're taking away the incentive to not commit a penalty.
Yeah.
It's there's a lot of leeway for us as officials to how we call a game and what we call a game and how the game is going. And again, if there's no disincentive to not get a penalty because you're going to sit for a minute and 30, at a high school game it has 17-minute or 18-minute periods.
Yeah.
I don't think that's any detriment really. It's it's a coaching tool too.
Since you brought up the length of the games, I'd kind of like to touch on this because, you have teams that are playing a JV game that may be 14 minutes. Then you have a JV game that's playing 16 minutes with an ice cut, and the fees are the same for the referees. Has there been any discussion with regard to these teams lengthening the games? Because I've seen squirt games now going to 14 minutes, and it's a $30 game. And I'm just kind of curious because, the teams, they'll keep you there. They got 2 hours of ice. They want to run 3 25-minute running periods or 3 30-minute running periods, whatever they can get away with because they've got the slot. I know when we get back into like actual league play, there are rules and it says, yes, you're playing a 13-minute period or a 14-minute period, but we do have these discrepancies, and yet the fees for the referees remain the same.
Well, let's start. You're talking two different things. Everybody knows what the league plays times are and what your commitment is to officiate those games. Whether or not we agree with some of them, that's just what they are. When you're talking about you're going to Seven Bridges or you're going to do a tryout game or a scrimmage game when they're trying out, or they're just having a practice game. They got somebody in from Indianapolis or something. Sorry, just because you don't want to be there for 2 hours and they have 2 hours, you bought into that. Now again, there's ways to work that because it's good and bad too. Those are good opportunities too, because that's where you can, if I get put into a situation like that, I show up and I'm not quite sure what it's supposed to be. It's listed as a JV game, and all of a sudden it's a practice game, and they say, "Oh, we have 2 hours and we want to do this." I'll say, "Well, you know what? Let's work it this way. Let's do 3 runnings or whatever we do, or do 2 runnings, see where we're at." Because how often have we shown up at the same thing? We get a practice game, and they're trying to put a varsity game in an hour and 10-minute slot.
Yeah.
So sometimes we benefit from it too.
Yeah.
But when you talk about league play and the costs, those AHAI assigners and AHAI recommends fees, and I can tell you that the AHAI assigners work pretty hard at if leagues are extending their times, that they're trying to compensate for that with those things. Now, that doesn't mean it's a fair compensation. It's just the leagues are going to set their own fees. And what you start to see happen is some leagues or some areas don't get officials because just what you're saying. If I work a JV game at West Meadows or whatever, and they're 3 14-minute periods, and I'm making X amount of dollars, why would I, go to All Seasons and it's a 2-hour ordeal for $1 or $2 more maybe. So officials think that way, and sometimes it's good games. Sometimes officials work for different reasons. But again, if you're a young official and you're making money for school and you're trying to do something, you're looking for your biggest bang for your buck because you're going to be able to work more games and make more income. I think our largest struggle is our really high-level officials, our level 4 guys that worked at Tier 1 midgets and all that. Let's be honest. If you work a Tier 1 midget game, that's 3 or 4 hours out of your life to do that. Mm-hmm. And if you take that into account, if you take our high-level officials who work NCAA, they work ACHA game, they're working those two, that really limits their ability to come back and work, decent high school games or decent Central States games or anything, because those games, your college game is 3 20-minute periods. And all USA games and those officials they're the only ones that can work those games, and it's a limited number, but it also affects everything down the line.
Well, this is something else, so I'm just going to put this comment up. I'm not sure who it came from, but it says the teams don't realize that officials stack games at different rinks in one day. And that's kind of one of the points that I do want to make when you think you're going to a squirt game that's going to be done in an hour and 10 minutes, and you find out that you're there for an hour and 40, and you do have another rink you're supposed to be at. It makes it a little tougher for the official to get from point A to point B because they are stacking games. And, It is a challenge sometimes getting around in the Chicagoland area with traffic and distance to the rinks and that sort of thing. I know the schedulers do a great job. When we have the tournaments, they know how long it takes to get from point A to point B, and they allow for that, and they do that very well. But if they don't know that the team has a 2-hour ice slot versus what they normally would have at an hour 10 or hour 15, that's where you run into your situation like that. So it's a good
Yep.
point. Whoever put that up,
Yep.
thank you for that, because that was my thinking as well. Somebody said
Well,
Pee Wee
yeah,
games,
there's-
17 minutes. Yeah, it's it's been happening.
Well, and you got to think too that with different assigners and different platforms, that's one of the things with the AHAI site, and one of the reasons it was created is so we can see those types of issues, where
Right.
that an official requests X amount of games. If he requests a varsity game at all seasons and wants to do a JV game in Romeoville 15 minutes after that varsity game is supposed to stop, it's probably not a practical thing to do, because one, you can never guarantee the game's going to start on time, and you can never guarantee
Right.
it's not going to run late.
Right. Or that you'll have an injury, or you'll have a Zamboni
Right.
that breaks down, whatever.
Right, and having multiple schedules and multiple platforms, officials can put themselves in a bind by saying, yeah, I'll take this game here, I'll take this game here, and then, not everybody, that's on the officials to make sure that they can do what they need to do. And, how often have the officials been called by an assigner saying, hey, get over here, we'll cover you over here, and that kind of thing. And that's the benefit of the good systems, that, the signers can see where everybody is. But when multiple systems, sometimes that creates not a controversy, but it creates an issue for the officials and the teams, because the teams could care less where their officials come from or what system they're using. They just,
As long as they're there.
as long as they're there and they're the best
And they
officials and they're doing a fair job, that's all they care about.
Yeah.
Everything else can be worked out. So it's up to the officials too, to self-monitor their ability. I mean, I don't want to rush from one ring to another if I don't have to.
Yeah,
I don't want to be late.
It's challenging.
Because you know what? Even if I'm working with Brad and I'm going to be late, and I call him saying I'm going to be late, I'm going to be late. And the fact of the matter is, he's going to be starting the game shorthanded, possibly by himself.
That's right. Well, one of the other things that Brad and I were going to talk about a little bit today, that we had covered, we weren't sure if we were going to have you as a guest today, but we wanted to talk a little bit about doing a game as a solo official. Do you want to stay with us and talk about some of that stuff, John? Do you have some, I'd like to just kind of share, like, maybe some procedures for guys if you are in a position where you end up having to do a solo game. It happens from time to time if your partner can't get to the rink, or maybe you have to start the game by yourself. What are some of the procedures that need to be followed and some of the best practices? So, Brad, you want to kick it off?
Well, yeah, sure. So we'll just start off with the scenario. Your partner has called you. They're stuck on the side of the highway. They're an hour away, and there's absolutely no way they're going to be there. So we remove any option that they're going to be there, okay?
Right.
So the number one is you go out and you tell the coaches. Of course, they're not going to be happy. No matter what, unfortunately, we have to deal with that. But here's the number one thing that you need to do after that. Ask the coaches, do they know anybody that has any officiating experience? Because there could be a parent that's up in the stands that has officiated for 20 years, and they might have their equipment in the car. And if you can get both coaches to agree on that person, then get them out on the ice. It's always safer to do a game with somebody out on the ice. The next thing is, if you can't find somebody with any officiating experience, see if one of the coaches or parents or somebody will still come out there and do the game with you. It's always safer to have two officials out on the ice. Why? Because if two players are fighting, kind of difficult to separate them by yourself. It can be done, of course, yes, but it's a good practice to have two people out there. I bet you if you look hard enough in a rink, you can generally get somebody out there to help you out. You got an extra whistle. I know it's COVID time, but retape
There you go.
and give it to them.
Take it, Brad.
Sorry to tell you. Sorry. I mean, I get it. The other, if they don't want to play with one official, that's understandable as well. You can always, try and work that out with them. If there's another official in the rink that's on another side, you can go over there and say, hey, when you're done with this, because that official needs to stay on the assignment that they are initially assigned for and has already started till the end of the game. Just so everybody knows, even if you're ever on a game, it's on one side and another game starting on the other, you need to finish the game that you're on. So if it's an hour behind, guess what? You're staying on that side, the other assignment, that's on the other side, your partner's going to have to figure something out. So
Well,
that's a
usually
very
in that situation,
big
you're gonna
point.
somebody's gonna get a call. The assigners are gonna step in, and they'll make a decision
Right.
as to what you're gonna do.
That is true, but I'm
Yeah.
just saying, ultimate worst case scenario. So after you've gotten that, go out and work the game the best possibly you can. But if you can avoid doing the game by yourself, I would highly suggest it. I mean, yes, it's a mic game or a sport game or a peewee game. You could probably get away with it depending on the levels. But the good thing is, hopefully, you have some sensible coaches that if you're in a Bantam game, they're going to go, well, I don't think this is a good idea today if you can't find anybody to help you out. I mean, doing a solo game, the one tough thing is trying to get to every place that you need to be. Yeah. You can't really watch a blue line from the goal line. I mean,
Right.
You're down on that goal line. It happens in the 2 official system where the 2 officials get caught up, where the front guy moves in with play and the back guy is following play because the last offensive defender is coming back. And then all of a sudden it gets turned over right at the blue line. And you're looking at it going, it looked offsides, but you don't know. So then you have to make a gut decision on it. And as much as you can avoid that, I think that's the best practice. If you do have a solo, though, number one, if you're sitting in the locker room and it's 5 minutes before, open up your schedule, pull that official's number out, and call them. Maybe they are running late and they're driving in the car and they don't want to be looking for your number and doing all that, and they're hoping they're going to get there. Call them. They'll answer and say, hey, I'm running late. Okay? Because if you call the assigners right away, they're going to say to you, did you call your partner? Because they're not going to know where they're at. Call your partner. If you can't get a hold of them, then take the steps to notify the assigners.
If you're running late, call your partner and let them know you're running late. I mean, you got to leave them, at least leave a message or text them, do something.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, way back in the day before everybody had a cell phone, I was one of the lucky officials because I paid for it myself. My parents weren't going to, but I remember you'd call a rink and you'd tell the rink, hey, I'm running late, let my partner know. And the rink would go let him know. Now, thanks to the beauty of cell phones, we don't have to do that. And I was just working last week or 2 weeks ago, and my partner texted me, just so you know, the games are listed on the same side. I have back-to-back, but the one is going to overlap by about 10 minutes. I'm coming over right after it. And he gave me that heads up, and I wasn't worried then. I was like, thanks for letting me know. I went out and told the coaches, hey, he's on the other side. He's coming over. He thought it was on the same side, which on his schedule it was. And that's not his fault. That's not the assigner's fault. It just happens sometimes. So he got over there, and it's a great alleviation when somebody lets you know. So just let your partners know. I got nothing else, though. I think I covered most of it.
John, what do you want to throw in there?
Well, there's one other option that you can use. You can ask the coaches, maybe a coach from each team, to do the offsides.
I forgot about that.
Stand on the blue line,
One option.
on the bench.
They don't even, depending on where you are, they don't even need to be on the ice. They could just call the offsides from that bench. So
Just
you can
have them
raise
their hand.
Right. Pull out some of your old crappy whistles out of your bag, give it to them, and here you go. And see how hard they think that is, how many times they blow an offside.
It's pretty amazing to watch because it's quite often.
That's it. But the other part is, we have such a good community, and I don't know how many times I've gone into the rinks and something's happened where, either games have run long, tournaments are way behind, or tournaments are way early. It's always a good idea when you pop into the rink as an official to go check the rinks. So say there is a game going on before yours and there's one official out there that you can pop your head, hey, I'll be out here as soon as I can. Do you need help? Because we see it mostly at the younger levels. So, and the younger officials don't know how to handle that at all times. They just know their partner didn't show up and they're petrified, and the coaches go, oh, go ahead, you can do it by yourself. And so when you see that, just be aware when you go into the rinks. I know many times, the crews that are 4 and 3 man end up being 2 man to cover games on the other facilities. So there's always some options, and just to be flexible. And I think everybody's, for the most part, has always been very flexible. But don't be afraid to. And then I think Brad was getting ready to say, when you're done with a game, that it's not how it went, meaning it wasn't on your schedule, or you did an extra game, you stayed 20 minutes, whatever it is. As soon as the game's over, pick up the phone to the scheduler, and they're going to make sure, one, that everybody knows what's going on. Two, they'll make sure you get paid for any extra you did. Three, that they know that you bent over backwards to help out the situation because you were the only option, maybe. But pick up the phone and call the scheduler and let them know what happened. So again, the last thing any of the schedulers want, I don't care who you're talking about, they want people to show up. They want responsible people. If you're late a few times, they don't want to use you.
That's right. Let's see. We got a couple more comments that came in here, and let's see what this one said before. Let's see. John did just before a Chargers game at Mount Prospect. Young official by himself. John joined him. Yep. It's good. Yeah, help out where you can, guys.
Right after the young official kicked the coach out. That was good.
One less person to scream at him while he's doing the game by himself.
Yeah. There's a comment over there, Scott, that came from Karen, and she's an athletic trainer.
Yes.
And it just dawned on me now with her doing 5 games in a day. She's just like officials. So
she's moving from point A to point B.
Right. I want to point out how important it is that we get our games started on time and try to finish them on time and move them along as fast as possible, because Karen depends on it too. And she has to get to that next assignment, and she has athletes she has to take care of. It's just like us as referees.
And coaches have multiple teams, and they're scheduled. They may have a second team that's playing at another rink, and they're on the move. So yes, drop that puck when you're supposed to.
I think Karen, she, for us old guys, I think Karen still drives a Pinto, so it takes a bit longer to get from rink to rink.
Hey, I want that Pinto. If she's got one, I'll take it. Okay. Especially if it still runs.
All right. Well, Scotty, we're at an hour.
Yeah.
I know you got another show.
Yeah, I do. That's not my dog barking. Frankie's quiet.
Dog.
That's your dog. Okay.
That must mean Amazon is coming.
There you go. All right. Well,
I don't know how to mute this one.
Yeah, just a reminder that we do this every Wednesday. Thank you all for joining us. John, appreciate your taking time out of your day to fill us in on this great news for us as hockey opens up here in the Chicagoland area. I know all of us are very excited about that and looking forward to getting out and skating. So if you haven't gotten completed, please finish up your work, guys. Get it done so we can see you out on the ice. And now we don't have to talk about going to observe these practices in other areas. So it is great news. And let's see. Karen says she's upgraded to a Chevelle. If you got a Chevy Chevelle, I want that more than the Ford Pinto, okay? And I hope it's got a big 442 in it or something, okay? So that's about it, everybody. So thanks for joining us. We'll see you again next Wednesday. John, thanks for being with us. Brad, as always, I'm Scott Smokin' Sills. Again, it's the Ref Room. The replays will be up there. Check them out on YouTube/C for channel/Ref Room. And we'll see you guys next week. Everybody have a great week.